Cash, you gotta make sure everything's away. But you know, the reason I heard with that was because they all like that. You gotta have.
Okay. Background, more voice and background here. Okay, let's speak of everybody. Stace?
Bill keep you busy.
Yeah.
Fair?
Doing all right.
All right, yeah, I think we got everybody here. We'll get rolling on things and. See, somebody's got to sit in the front row, Lisa. Josh, too. Appreciate that. We're coming. You got back row at church. You got to start there first. So. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. We expect a little bit smaller crowd today, specifically because, irrigation management, water management, if you don't have pivots, kind of hard to worry too much about water. So I thought a little bit smaller group, but this presentation, I've got plenty of slides in here. Stop me. Ask questions at any point, because I want to make sure we get your questions answered about where we're at. Okay? So, we'll kind of jump into things. My goals for today's meeting. I want to try and help you estimate the water available to our corn and soybeans in the soil today, based on some of the things we know. Number 2, estimate days to maturity for the corn and for the beans by planting date. Because as I've been out checking fields, looking at where things are at, we're a little more accelerated than I expected we would be, given all the heat we've had. So that's going to impact how much water we need and when we need that water. Number 3, how much water do we need from today going forward to make sure we can finish off these crops without wasting money, without putting too much water out there and having harvest concerns, compaction, those kind of things just fall. Number 4 is probably the most important one. Answer the questions you have. So if you have questions, don't leave today without getting those questions answered, okay? I don't claim to know everything, but we'll try and find a way to get you information you need that way. So, our perspective on water management, moisture probes, the whole 9 yards. As many of you know, we've been utilizing probes for about 3 years now. So that's taking the actual moisture probe, drilling the hole, putting it into the ground, monitoring as the season goes on. There's definitely pluses, but there's also a lot of limitations. First of all being, you pick a 80-acre field. The moisture probes are truly measuring about 1 square foot of that field. So we got a probe in the ground, and we're trying to make recommendations on that whole field based off of one spot. I can tell you sometimes you go down so far and you hit a rock. So you pull it out and go somewhere else and hit another rock. Or we had somewhere hitting bedrock this year too. So somewhere between 30 and 36 inches, we hit solid bedrock in there. So moved over 5 rows, didn't hit that. So we know the subsoil is different. How we have different restrictions, different soil types through there. Density of the sensors. I was going to grab one of those. I didn't grab it up here. You'll see on one of the slides here, the sensors on these, there's 2 different types we have. One has 3 sensors, which we typically use more for soybeans. 8-inch, 16-inch, 24-inch depth. The other one goes down to 36 inches, but it's every 4-inch sensor. So you got a sensor at 2 inches, then at 6, and at 10, 14, etc. I like more data. I like more sensors. But that being said, we get a rock beside one of those, and it's going to say that side has no water in it. Well, that's just because if we moved over a couple inches, you'd have more soil from that. So they're estimating the amount of water that's in this soil at the different depths. Scalability. Last year I rented some probes off of a friend. We put out more. We went into 2024 dry. We stayed dry for a long time. So having that moisture information out there early is important. But I can't install these probes until you've made your last pass across there. Typically that's a nitrogen pass. Because you run over them, that's an expensive mistake. And it tells us nothing then. So trying to get that in between when you put on nitrogen and then when we think we need to know water availability is a little bit tougher. It's a time crunch. 2024, we made it work out. 2025, it rained April and May and June. until it didn't. And all at once, like, hey, where are those probes at? What's moisture telling us? Like, oh, we haven't put them in because we hadn't needed them yet. So it takes 2 or 3 days for it to get calibrated and start repeating back information here. So they're not perfect. Let's start with that. We've looked at some other model-based things like we used to with the nitrogen from Encirca, but that's not ready for release yet today here. So our goal with these probes and the moisture conversation in general is to make sure we're giving sound agronomic advice based on the water available to our crops throughout the season. So knowing that we can't put one in every soil type, every field, we've done some tests of putting 2 different probes in fields. It helps. You have more information, but at the end of the day, you're going to turn that probe on one time. Sorry, that pivot on one time and make a lap. So unless we can vary that, we can vary by speed, till we can vary by nozzles and have the controllers to do all that, it's nice to know, but not really actionable. PropX, the company we work with, they often say, look at your biggest soil type in the field and focus your moisture on that. We've tried that. We've also tried some of the drier soil types. Because I know if this is dry, yeah, I may be overwatering some other parts, but I don't want that dry part to get too dry. So there's different answers, different solutions here. Bottom line, at this time, we do not plan to expand this water management service. We're going to have a handful of probes we're going to put out every year. We can put in different fields, different situations, different planting dates, different crops to try and get an idea what's working, what's not, where's our moisture levels at in the soil. But just to call a spade, we're not looking to add this out and all of a sudden jump to 50 probes next year. Ooh. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So with that, I want to go through a couple definitions, some background information here, okay? No one likes the background stuff, but just bear with me for a minute here. Field capacity. So field capacity is how much water can that soil hold on to before gravity pulls it away. Clay soils, smaller pores between them, smaller size, can hold on to more water than sands do. And you say, thank you, Mr. Obvious. Yeah, we knew that. When it rains, the water goes out quicker. But that comes into play for things like this. VWC, volumetric water content. So that's the percentage. What percent of the water can we hold on to in that soil type? So like a clay down here can hold on, its field capacity, okay, is 42% moisture. So 42% of that, when you pick up a volume of soil, 42% of that can be water when it's full. But a sand is only 10%. So we know we can't hold on quite as much like that. Wilting point, or the permanent wilting point. Very important point here. The permanent wilting point is a soil moisture at which no life survives. The forces that hold that moisture to that soil particle are greater than what the plant can pull away. You reach the wilting point, there's no recovery. We will see corn leaves roll much earlier than we get to this wilting point. So that's kind of a sign that we're getting there. We know if we're seeing rolling leaves, we need to have more water out there. For a sand, that wilting point is 5%. It can only hold on to 10%, but if you get to 5%, you're done. Don't bother watering. That plant is dead. Interesting though, on a clay, it can hold on to 42% of the water. But if you get to 30% moisture, it's done. You can pick up a handful of clay soil, still feel moisture in there, but it's not going to release that moisture back to the roots. So knowing our soil type helps us understand how much water can be available to that. Next one, depletion. That's just how much water we've taken from the soil. In this chart, so it's right there at the top. In this chart, and a lot of places, they recommend getting down to 50% depletion, meaning you always want to have that extra 50% buffer in there. This is kind of like your trigger. When do I turn on the pivots? If I get to 50% depletion in the soil, that's not 50% the way to the wilting point. That's my trigger. At a minimum, turn on the pivot then to make sure that I'm not running out. And as you all know, you got pivots. Some pivots take 12 hours to get around. Some take 4 days to get around. Knowing this trigger point, when do I turn it on, is important to make sure that we don't get that last set of acres to get to this wilting point before we get that lap put on. available water capacity. How much water can we store between those two? So our clay soils hold the highest percentage of water. But interestingly, right here, a clay soil will hold 1.35 inches of water per foot. So if you've got roots down to 4 feet depth, we can hold on to about 5.25 inches of water that's available to that plant. What's interesting is, even though a silty clay loam won't hold on to as much, it actually releases more water. So we have 1.9 inches per foot in a silty clay loam soil. The same 4-foot rooting depth there gets us almost 7.5 inches of available water to that plant. Now, we live in the real world. We're probably not irrigating silty clay loam, unless it's just a vein in that field that has a lot more sand in there. But the different soil types, and specifically this field capacity, the available water capacity, tells us by foot how many inches of water can we hold on to and then release back to that crop. So how much can our soils hold? This chart's a very good starting point. Now, that being said, you go out there and Google soil water holding capacity. You'll find 5 different websites with 5 different numbers out there. So you got to find one that you kind of like, that reads to you. I can share this with you later on if you have interest in this. Limitations. This tells you the maximum. Doesn't tell you where we're at today. Where we're close to the full point, that 50% depletion point, that refill point. 2024, last year, I was installing some of the probes. And as it goes, I've got a 3-foot drill bit. You start drilling down, and you can kind of feel the soil texture change as you move down. You start feeling more moisture deeper down. Well, I got to one of the fields, drilled, got down the first foot, dust. Okay, I know we've been dry, I didn't think we were quite that dry. Next foot, dust. Okay, a little surprising. The next foot below that, dust. The 36 inches was nothing but dust the whole way down. So I called the farmer and said, hey, don't know what your plans are, but I think it's time to put on some water. We aggressively watered that field and had record yields on it. Would we have watered that aggressively had we not known that we had no moisture down to 36 inches? Don't know. In many cases, I think just the act of taking that drill and that 3-foot drill bit out there and just drilling down can show us how much moisture is out there, how the soils change. That's my next point here. We can talk about we have a sand on top. But as we go deeper in the soil profile, our soils change. There's one soil type we've tested a couple years now where I've got a loam, which loam was heavy sand, but still has some silt to it, in the top 20 inches. At 20 inches, I hit yellow clay. When you hit yellow clay, the roots also hit yellow clay and typically go sideways. So we can say I've got all the moisture I want inside that clay, but if the roots can't go down into that or through that clay layer, we're not going to be able to access the water that's there. So in effect, on that field, we really have to focus on the top 20 inches because that's all the roots can actually access. So I'm not here to sell you moisture probes or moisture probe data. We're just going to give you a little bit of lay of the land. What does it look like? So the most basic chart we have, and we use more often than not, is kind of like our fuel gauge. So when you open up the app, this is what it looks like. The black line is the current available water to the plant. So you look at this, this would be today's date. I took this a couple days ago, so bear with me. But you can kind of see as time's gone on, where we've had, there we are. We've had rainfall events or irrigation events. So the water goes down. These peaks, that's where we've added water to those fields, either from rainfall or through irrigation. Then it kind of falls off a little quicker here. But then from there, you can kind of see the stair-step approach. When it goes horizontal, that's nighttime. We're not pulling as much water out then. As it drops, that is during the day. So that's the 12, 14 hours during the daylight hours. That plant is pumping water out to cool itself, to keep the leaves from burning up, from causing damage. So you can kind of see, as we kind of go through here, it kind of drops, 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 drops. Then we had rainfall. Back down again. The green area is the good part of the gauge. If you keep that black line inside the green area, you are not limited for water. Your roots have sufficient water, you're good to go. Farming like a pro. Next, the pink area. This is set to that 50% wilting point. This is the trigger to tell you if I get to that pink line, I'm not out of water. It's not a concern. It just says you need to turn on that trigger. Turn on the pivot because you're getting down that second half. You're approaching that wilting point. But, sorry, you have half the water in reserve yet in that soil to use. White. If you're in the white, you've overfilled it. Just like run a gas tank over, it's going to come out the top. When we have too much water in here, gravity, either A, water runs off the top, which we've lost that water, or B, probably worse, gravity starts pulling the excess down. The soil can't hold on to that water, so it flushes down at the bottom of the profile. When it goes down, what happens? Nitrogen, sulfur, all of our leachable nutrients go down with it. Maybe going down deeper in the profile, it may still be in the soil, but deeper than the roots can access it. So in essence, we've lost that. Gray line right here is the future. So these probes look at the future forecast and say, okay, based off of temperature, rainfall percentages, how much do we anticipate you're going to need in the coming time? About a week's outlook's what they look at here. So like in this situation here, this would say over the next week, you still have sufficient water to be in that good range. Questions on that? One last thing here. You probably can't see this, it's small print. Our full gauge is at 12.5 inches. So when this soil is at field capacity, 12.5 inches, we have 12.5 inches of water in that soil profile, down to the depth of the probe, so 36-inch depth. Our refill point is set at 10 inches. Compare this field to the next one. Same scale, different field. What do we have here? This field is sand. This is full at 2.9 inches. Our refill trigger is at 2.1. And if we let it get all the way down there, the permanent wilting point where the crops would not survive, would not come back, is at 1.3 inches. We've got to monitor this field much closer than we do the previous one. So really we have about an 0.8 of an inch is our buffer that we're trying to work with. Now in a year like this where it rains frequently, that kind of helps us out. Or we stay on top of the irrigation and say, you know what? I know every 4 days, 5 days, I've got to hit this soil type to make sure we're okay. And if you look out here in our 7-day forecast, shocker, since it's going to be hot, 90s again this weekend, it's saying we'll be down there into that pink range, into that refill range by the weekend. This was pulled before the rain last night, so I'll have to see how that changes with all that. But fields different. Fields differ. Soil types differ. Management differs on how we look at these. Questions on that? I think it's straightforward, but I don't want to talk over everybody's head either. Thank you. I did not mention that, Rick, but that's a good point. So not only is this looking at the water use by the plant, the temperatures, rainfall percentages, this also is looking at the crop water use by growth stage. So we'll plug in planting date, maturity of the crop, corn, soybeans, the maturity of that product. So it kind of knows at different stages how much water is needed by that plant at that time. I can also kind of show you, like in this case, we really didn't need a whole lot of moisture here early on. It's a bean field. I'll give you a little hint on that one. Beans don't typically take up a whole lot of moisture until we start filling pods. When you start filling pods, you can start to see that more day-night trend of that kind of downward stair step. Thank you, Rick. Anything else I missed, Rick? Okay. Knowing your soil type, knowing the water holding capacity can definitely influence the frequency we need to irrigate. This is the graph I kind of like to look at a little bit more because, again, I'm more the details guy, the data guy. So this actually shows the different sensors. So the blue is the 2-inch depth, orange is 6-inch depth, 10, 14, 18, etc. So this tells us where, from that depth, are the plants pulling moisture out of the soil. Here's your question. The one question I'm going to ask you today. Inside this box, what depths is the plant pulling moisture from the soil? Anyone want to guess? 14 inches. So the 14 is the green line here. I would say, Baron, maybe at the tail end of that box, we're starting to pull from that 14-inch. But above that, 10-inch, as time goes on, we see it start to drop. So that tells us the roots are pulling from there. 6-inch, not quite that heavy change, but there's just slow decline all the way through there. The blue line, 2-inch. I would say definitely 2-inch, 6-inch, and 10-inch. We are pulling moisture from there. Towards the end of that, maybe there's 14. If you really want to argue, perhaps even down here at 34 inches, 30 inches. There's a little bit of wiggle here at the end that the roots are down there. Again, I focus too much on these, but how much are we pulling from 22 inches, 26? Nearly zero. That's a heavy clay band. But the moisture is there, the roots aren't able to pull it out from that. So either A, haven't grown through that, or B, there's a way to replenish that section of the soil profile from the river, from other sources, from way away. Why does this matter? Where's our fertility at? 2, 10, 2, 6, 10, probably not much deeper than 10 inches. Keeping roots pulling moisture from the upper part of the profile also brings in water, but also brings in fertilizer. It brings in nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. If we have zero moisture coming in from those upper sensors, we probably don't have enough P and K getting in that plant. So in the growth stage, the nutrient uptake at that point also is important to where we need to water. I have a feeling, just knowing this field, so one more thing too, when I put these sensors in, you put it between the row. You pick 2 healthy plants, drill the hole, so that way you have active roots growing right around these sensors. So they can kind of tell what's going on there. You don't put it in the middle, so you want to know exactly what those plants are doing. I've got a hunch here that since we're pulling no water here, I've got roots that are growing down the side of that probe and finding down here where we get more gravel below that clay layer. Because I don't think they're growing all the way down through there at the most of the field, or we'd see more change here. Right back here, big rainfall event. How deep did that water go? So I don't have the scale on here, but let's just say this was 1.5 inches rain. The 2-inch definitely saw a change. 6-inch, 10-inch, 14, 18, even in the 22 inches, we saw an increase in the moisture from that rainfall event. It infiltrated very well. Now, part of that may be because we were getting lower here. So we're kind of depleting that upper part, but we got that moisture, that rainfall event got down to 22 inches. Never made a blip at 26, 30, or 34 inches. So that's kind of one fun thing too when you look at these. How deep is our irrigation or our rainfall events penetrating down into that soil profile? Why am I showing you these graphs? Number one, we're monitoring 7 fields this year. And based on either good irrigation management or sufficient rainfall events, today I have none of those fields that are a challenge, that are running out of water. They're all in the optimal range. Assuming you guys are also watering your fields, I don't think we're at a deficit today. Even with the 90-degree day highs, mid-70 lows, we're keeping on top of our moisture in these fields, which is a good thing. At least through the next week, most of next week, I think we have sufficient water, even before the rainfall like we had last night. I think we have sufficient water to get through almost a week here before we get concerned about the rest of the season here. And the rest of the season being different maturities, planting dates, those kind of things. On the April corn, I'll go deeper into this in the coming slides. I think the April corn and beans probably need another shot of rain. Rain and or irrigation before we get to maturity here. Definitely for May and June crops, we'll definitely need more irrigation going forward here. So where are we at? Where's the crop at today? Granular Insights is our software package. A cool thing has been they are building out that software. They're adding new features every day. If you share as planned data with us, there's a tab on there now that will actually track growing degree units for you from data planting to today. So in this case, Today, we have 2,362 heat units on this cornfield that was planted April 23rd. We know the hybrid, therefore we know this hybrid reaches black layer at 2716. We can compare different years. We're actually behind on heat from 2024. Side note, but you can pick different years, different averages, but the late April planting, based on this, is somewhere between 350 and 400 GDUs to black layer. The 10-day forecast says we're going to get somewhere between 24 and 29 GDUs per day. If we just shoot down the middle and say 27 GDUs, this field will reach black layer in 13 days. August 26th. Less than 2 weeks, we'll have 30% corn. How many of us have April planted corn? How many of us are counting on running corn in early September? You can say, Brian, bullshit, I don't believe you. You're just pulling numbers out there. This model's wrong. Fair enough. Go out in the field and break ears. This graph, you've seen it before. If you haven't, I've done you this service. This is dent stage. So, I know it's tougher to see, but at the start of dent, you start seeing that hard starch line right here on the very tip of those caps. When that starts, it is roughly 400 GDUs to maturity. That field from the last example that said it needed 13 days is right here, R5.25. The milk line is a quarter of the way down that year. So, by my estimates, our April 23rd and 24th planted corn is at that R5.25 milk stage, meaning we need 300 heat units to get to maturity. You will have 30% corn prior to September 1. As long as the weather forecast is correct, which has been wrong all year long here. So why would it be right now? April 20th and 29th, what I've been looking at is right there. It's at the start of dent. We're 400 GDUs away from that. So if nothing else, if you believe nothing else what I'm telling you, go out and break some ears in half. And when you do that, check where this is. And based off that, I think you might find that the corn is maturing quicker than what we would have thought. I think y'all got my text earlier in the week here about GDUs, how we've had one of the hottest nighttime average temperatures on record. That's what's pushing us forward. It's not really hot daytime highs, it's hot nighttime lows. And the problem with that is we don't have sunlight when we're out there. This is a busy graph, but bear with me, because I want to kind of walk through the different planting dates. So I just told you our April corn is going to mature by August 26th. When you look at this chart, this is daytime high, forecast daytime high, forecast nighttime low, and the GDUs that correlates to. Late September, sorry, didn't get that right. Mid-August to late August. Typically, we average about 24 to 22 GDUs per day. What we're seeing here is we're more 29, 26, 28. We are hotter. We're getting more heat, more GDUs than we would expect. Over the next 9 days, which as far as my weather forecast went, the next 9 days are supposed to give us 245 GDUs. I told you the late April corn. I think the early May corn, from what I've been looking at, is about 425 to 475 GDUs. These next two lines are just using the average temperatures for the year. So on average, we get 22 to 24 GDUs through here. And even into early September, we're down to 20. Average weather tells us the early May corn will black layer on August 31st. Mid-May, Need somewhere between 475 and 600 GDUs. That's way out in the future, right? It's September 5th with average weather. I don't know about you, but I keep watching my forecast, and they all, for some reason, they say, hey, next week it's going to cool off. We're going to finally get that break. And every day we get closer to that, what happens? Yeah, another day of 90. Yeah, maybe one more day of 90. Just keep pushing that back. If we have that temperature creep continue, these dates move forward. The June corn. June corn is just at blister stage. Maybe moving towards milk. 600, 650 GDUs. Guys, that's September 8th. What that means is also we're cutting out about 2 weeks of grain fill on the June corn. That many people look at it and say, oh man, that June corn looks great. You know, it looks like it's no pollination concerns, really good kernel counts. You're spot on. You are right. But if we cut out 2 weeks of sunlight, I'm not sure it's going to finish quite as well.
Right.
Yes, please.
I heard that above 88 degrees, the GDUs stop.
Thank you. The scale, 86.
Okay.
So 86 is the cap. And that's why once we get to 86 degrees, anything above that doesn't count. So even like next week, they're talking about, hey, we're going to cool down, right? We're going to cool down and only have 84 for a high. Well, we're still almost maxing out the top end of that scale. So it's really these hot nighttime temperatures. You know, when was the last time, I guess I'll answer my own question, but more often than not, our nighttime lows have been in that low mid 70s. We've not had a mid 60s morning in quite a while. Even 2 weeks ago, when we cooled down a bit, we still had lows in the upper 60s. We never had one of those, you walk outside, it's 60 degrees and put on a sweatshirt and really feel like fall's turning the corner here. But yes, so the top end of the scale stops at 86. It's at lower end stops at 50. So we think about into fall here, why don't we get as much dry down when we get into October? Well, when the low temperature drops below 50, that doesn't count. We kind of put a floor on 50 on that. I'll cover some of that on some of these future slides too, but thank you, good question. Yes. Absolutely. Correct. And that's one thing, within that granular insights, when you plug in the hybrid you're using, it goes and references that specific hybrid. And while I want y'all planting Pioneer, if for some reason you have some of the competitive stuff in there too, that's also included. If they publish on their websites what the GDUs are to maturity, that's in there. So we'll figure that for Pioneer and for competitive things. But yes, that's on average. We could always see changes like that. Hybrid maturities add into that. The forecast changing will change that as well.
What's that plant do with the heat above 80s?
Good question, Jeff. So what's the plant do when the heat gets above 86? For the first time this year, I heard a guy from Illinois, one of their ag economists talking, and he's calculating a stress index. That stress index is above that. How many GDUs do we have above 86? And his number, and don't quote me on this, but it was like 160, 170. Some of that kind of range. Any year that we've had enough heat, so the stress index totals 160, 170 like that, we've never had an above trend line yield. So the days we're getting to 90, we're picking up 2 stress days on that. We've only had 90 since, I don't know, 3 months now it feels like. The last I checked on that report, our area was around 140 right now, 140 stress days. I'd never heard that concept before this year, but it makes some sense. Because if the scale stops at 86, that must mean above 86 is bad, right? He's been calculating that and back figured over previous growing seasons. That's what he found. Is that when you were above that, if you accumulated, I don't remember what the threshold is, it may have been 160, 180, somewhere in that kind of range. You never had above trend line corn yields. Personally, I think that's why we're seeing more of the tip back in the fields than what I'm looking at. Doesn't appear that the USDA is looking at that for sure. Question, Jake? Okay.
Another thing,
Yes.
you know, How about, does the humidity have anything much to do with, the growth stage and all that other good stuff?
Sure, thank you. So humidity, how's the humidity impacting our corn? Well, quick detour here. The high humidity, I think, is why we're seeing some kernels with some ears with pollination issues. High humidity does a couple of things. It keeps our nighttime temperatures higher. So we don't fall off as much overnight because there's more water in the air. The water heats up, doesn't cool down as quickly as dry air does. But we go back into late June, early July, when the first cornfield started pollinating. I mean, the big thing on the internet was tassel wrap, right? Oh, tassel wrap's the end of the world. Look at these poorly pollinated ears. The high humidity was impacting that. So the plant was growing quicker than what it was supposed to because of high humidity. The internodes didn't elongate to push that tassel all the way up and out the top. So you had a wide open tassel shedding pollen everywhere. But in many cases, that high humidity also kept the silks alive longer. So I've got lots of ears that you go out there and look. It looks like bicolored sweet corn as you get towards that milk stage. You've got yellow kernels and white kernels kind of interspersed on there. Those kernels finally pollinated. It was 7 to 10 days later than what we had expected it would be. So the humidity, high humidity is good. I mean, we've got moisture. Plants need moisture. You know, when we get into a drought conditions, the air gets so dry, rainfall coming across just dries up before it gets here. So we've had more chance to have rainfall. Humidity's helped the plants grow, but it also has helped keep those nighttime temperatures higher as well. That answer your question? Corn maturity. Important point here. What does corn maturity mean? Corn maturity is aka black layer, which is 30% corn. So drying corn, air drying corn from 30% to 25% requires 30 GDUs. Thank you, Andrew. From 25% and below, it takes 45 GDUs. So what does that mean, Brian? In early September, using average weather, our average highs in early September are 83, average lows are 58, means we get 20 GDUs per day. So to get 30 GDUs, day and a half to drop a point. How many times are you out there in early September and you go, it's 95 damn degrees again? That would help us drive more. I'd even go to the first week of October. It says our average is 68 and 46. Doesn't feel like I've seen 68 in early October for a long time. So the more we keep high temperatures longer, we'll continue to drop this moisture. But the key is when you get to 25%, it takes 50% more heat to drop a point. The easy moisture comes out going from 30 to 25. And then it takes more going out below that point. So just because it's going to mature August 26th doesn't mean you're going to start the combine on August 27th. But 20 units a day, it could be in 10 days, 2 weeks, we could be down in that low 20s range. So why are we here? How much water do we need for this crop? This is just kind of a rough estimate number here. I'm going to switch and go to a different chart here. This tells me by growth stage how much we need. So on this chart, for example, when we get to blister, we need 0.32 inches of water per day. For this growth stage, we need a total of 1.9 inches to go from that blister stage to that start of dent stage. Based on looking at the ears, the heat units, everything where we're at, I'm estimating that our April corn still needs to have almost 7 inches of water available. Just so we ground set here. Does that mean I need to run a pivot and put on 7 inches of water? No. But I have to have 7 inches of water available to that crop. That first example we had 2.5 inches of water available till we get to that trigger line to restart. That would mean unless we get additional rainfall coming in, we probably need to have at least one more shot of irrigation. Maybe it's 2 to get us to that 7 inches we need to get there. Well, more important point 2, throughout the growing season, we don't want to get down to that pink line. We want to keep 50% of that water as our trigger point. Late season here, I don't want us mudding out crops. We can actually go below that line a little bit more to give us a little more buffer here, because we can draw that down going into harvest, so we have dry soils. We reduce compaction risk, things like that. So if we have 2.5, 3 inches of water available to this crop, it may still mean putting on 2, 3 inches of water, or making sure that's available to that crop. The magical thing about irrigation is we put on 0.6, an inch of water. Sometimes that adds up to more than what you would expect. It's not 1 inch available to that crop as a moisture probe start looking at it. Now all of a sudden I put on 0.6, and I increased my moisture content in the soil by 1.3. As you go down that probe, doesn't make sense. I've asked support questions. They kind of go, yeah, thanks for your help. Not really the answer I was looking for. But I'm not saying you must put on 3 inches or 4 inches of rainfall and or irrigation from this point on. But the old adage, hey, we get to dent stage, that crop's made, by all means, it is not. From the start of that milk line moving down to the bottom, we add 40% of the weight to that kernel during that stage. So we've got 2 weeks to go and still need to make sure we have moisture there so that we can maximize that kernel depth, test weight. For the mid-May corn, mid-May being more halfway between R3 and this R4, my estimate is we need 9 inches of water. 3.8 here, 3.8 here, plus the 1.4 after maturity. So once we get to black litter, we still need to have almost 1.5 inches of water available to keep that plant alive, nutrients moving back and forth, so we're not just limping across that finish line and crashing. If we have June corn, there's almost 11 inches of water we still need to have for this crop. I hate to say it, but unless we caught more rain than what I think we did, I don't think we're done irrigating the April corn yet. But time will tell. I'll get more chance to kind of dig into things and see where we're at, but we want to make sure we finish this out because we need the bushels, period.
The plant funnel for itself and don't get calculated into your soil.
Let me make sure I understand that question, Jeff. So if we, like last night, if we had 6 tenths of an inch of rain, not all that water hit the ground, right? How much of it got into that plant from like behind the leaves and all that? That's a great question. I don't know. And that may be something that's adding to the numbers, whether it be from irrigation, whether it be from rainfall. No. Well, it's not calculated into what the plant needs. It's all, the probe won't ever see that. So the probe might see that, hey, on this day I expected we would use 1/4 inch per day. But for some reason this next day here, I only used 1/10. So it may be able to say that the crop didn't use as much as we were expecting to because I had extra water that was behind the leaf sheaths that made its way into that plant. But if the water fell on the field, I feel pretty confident it will get utilized by that plant. So it will definitely help get in there. I don't have a good way of answering that and putting a fine point onto that's how much is in there. That makes sense.
Pioneer's default and 50% moisture. How does that play into this?
Seed corn. If we're going to defull corn at 50% moisture, what are we doing here? We're in essence killing it. Well, I'd almost step back. I don't know if we're killing it. We're burning the leaves off. That stalk is still going to pull up moisture to keep that plant alive. If you split the stalk, it's still got some green to it. We can still have water going into that plant because we need to reallocate the nutrients from the leaves, from that stalk, to help finish out that ear. The goal for defulling is twofold. Number one is smaller kernels. So we have some of these females that throw massive, large rounds. We can shrink those up and get them to more manageable size. Number two, it also helps with the stress emergence scores the next year. I would love to sit down, Jeff, and look at where we're at. The goal there is to stop kernel growth, but I want to make sure what might be in that soil profile. It may very well be that on defulled corn, we need to have 2 inches or 3 inches of water available to keep that stalk alive. If we run out of water and that stalk dries up, we're going to see even smaller kernels than what they estimate. And that's sometimes I think where that art of defulling, that I wish they'd give you more information on how to manage that, they don't really know. And therefore you get wide differences in not only kernel size, but germ, those kind of things. I think we still need to have water in that soil profile. But without sitting down looking field by field and kind of where we're at maturity-wise, I can't give you a strong answer on that. But we can talk about that. I'll follow up on that with you, okay? Great questions. What else? Soybeans, the stupid plant. So this chart's from Purdue. It kind of goes through the days on soybean maturity. From beginning bloom all the way up to full seed. This is the first chart that ever just made sense to me. Because when you look at this, here's the average, the median number of days to go through those stages. Yet look at the range. At full pod, R4, 3/4 inch pod. Sometimes it takes 4 days to go through that to the R5 stage. Sometimes it takes 26 days. Soybeans move forward based on day length, temperature, humidity, all those kind of factors. Corn is just on heat. You can almost calculate corn just based on the heat we've had and figure out where you're going to be at. Soybeans, when I started as an agronomist 15 years ago, we had a 3.0 B, 93 Y05. Lafayette, it's a solid 3.0. We bring it down here, it was a 3.4. It looked around and said, hey, I've got enough sunlight, I got enough heat. Why would I stop growing yet? Let's just keep growing here. So soybeans are a lot more tricky on being able to say, we are done. We can stop watering here because we all know yield from soybeans, seed size. The more we can keep water in there, allow that plant to reallocate nutrients from the stem, from the leaves, to get the biggest beans possible is how we make a lot of our yield. By my numbers, sorry, this is going off the average date here. This says late April planting, we're at R6 right now. Full seed size inside those pods. Based on these numbers, that says September 1, we will have mature plants. Mid-May would be September 8th. Early June would be September 15th. This is where I'm going to call bullshit. I've never seen soybeans in our part of the world be ready to run, be mature on September 1. I do think, though, that with the high heat we've had, we are moving forward. Our beans are more mature. They're more advanced today than what they have been in other years. Beans love hot nighttime temperatures. Corn likes cool nighttime temperatures. That's why we have some of that give and take. But I think the beans look really good. Based on my experience, I'm going to push that back a little bit. I'm going to go more towards the tail end of some of these. I think it's entirely possible that we could be at quote unquote maturity on the April beans September 10th. Mid-May might be more like the 17th. And early June, I think it's still September 23rd. So what does maturity mean in soybeans? Maturity begins at R7, one normal color pod on the main stem. Sorry, one pod on the main stem that's reached its mature color. Brown, gray, tawny. One. Maturity is 60% moisture. So just because we're now mature doesn't mean we're almost absolutely ready to run. In an average year, it takes about 12 days to go from R7, one mature pod on that main stem, to R8, 95% of the pods have reached a mature color, which is roughly also 15% moisture. So you throw those in there, how often are we running beans before September 20th? Sometimes, but more often than not, it's the later part of September here. I think we've got moisture, we've got heat. The beans are going to keep growing and filling, potentially even reflowering after the rain we had yesterday. So time will tell on this. I think the beans have great potential. But where I think we're going to see an early corn harvest, I'm not convinced we'll see beans come off as early as what we want to. And we've had guys try and plant 1.5s, 2.0s, thinking, oh man, I'll get them off in 90 days time and maybe even double crop beans after beans. In our part of the world, it never happens. The beans say, why would I shut down? They like growing as a green vegetated plant. As a result, they'll stay green and healthy longer than what you ever should. How much water do the beans need? Similar charts here, similar stages. I can tell you the April beans right now are at this R6 stage, which is full seed inside those pods. We need 4 1/4 inches of rain to finish up the beans. or irrigation. Midway, we're kind of more at this mid-pod fill. We have seeds inside there. We're at that R5 stage, but they're kind of getting larger. They're not completely large yet, but that puts us more at 7.5 inches of rain irrigation on those beans. June, still got a ways to go, but they're also at R5. The June beans actually right now are at early pod fill. We're using 1/3 of an inch per day. And to move through all these stages here, we need almost 10 inches of rain, almost 11 inches of rain actually, water on those beans. I've thrown a lot at you here. Here's some summary, some takeaway slides. And I can share this, any of this information you want with you guys to kind of think about later on. I think that April corn could be mature in 2 weeks. But based on these charts, water in the soil or supplemental water, we still need almost 7 inches of water to finish out that crop well. For the mid-May corn, I think we could be mature in early September. We still need almost 9 inches of water there. And with the hotter weather, the June corn is maturing quicker than what I like. Not that we have a lot of June corn in here, but there's still 11+ inches of water we need for that June corn. Rick mentioned it, maturity plays into that. If it's fuller season, you can push these dates back a little bit. Might need a little bit more water than that even. But if you take away nothing else, I do not think we are done watering corn yet. Unless we get rainfall that's not in the forecast here, we need to continue putting on water. Soybeans. I think the warm nights have helped move our soybeans along. The soybeans are more advanced today than what they normally would be because they love nighttime temperatures, warm nighttime temperatures. I don't expect our April beans to be mature on September 1, but I think they could be on September 10th. Given 10, 12 days of dry down weather, I think we could be running beans on September 20th, plus or minus. We still need 4 inches of water available to that crop through the soil, through rainfall, through irrigation. Mid-May and early June beans, add another 7 to 14 days, respectively to that, and need to have between 7 and 10.5 inches of water on those. Bottom line, estimating the water in your fields. If you don't have probes in those fields, what do we do? Soil types are a great starting point to kind of estimate how much water we could have within that soil type in the field. If you've got specific questions, call me. I'd love to sit down and kind of go through field by field to figure out what we might need on these situations going forward here. Currently, as we look out into 2026 and beyond, we're not looking to expand our moisture probe program beyond the handful of probes we have today. We're probably going to continue putting those out, different planting dates, different crops, different soil types, to kind of have a nice starting point for conversations. But we're not going to be rolling that out in a much bigger way. If you've got interest in those, let's talk. Let's see what we can do, what makes sense. But in my mind, I think it's a handful of probes every year to help guide conversations, guide what's going on, what we can do. I talked too long. I told Rick it'd be done 45 minutes easy, and we're easily 10 minutes over that like we always are. Thank you. Appreciate the questions through the session. Is there any other questions? Just kind of summarize anything before we go, before we eat.
Brian, this is a different question. We fungicide our corn last week. Did we miss the window, or is it still going to do some good since the way you're talking on the maturity of the corn coming down raw?
Fungicide. I thought that might come up. So, thank you for that prompt. What are we finding in the field today? Gray leaf spot. I'm finding some diplodious leaf streak, minor disease. Southern rust is the #1 disease I'm finding out there from field to field. Whether it be fields that haven't been sprayed yet, just recently got sprayed, or some of the concern is too, things that got sprayed 3 weeks ago. So that April planted corn that got sprayed 3, almost 4 weeks ago now, the residuals worn off. Where are we at? If we are into this dough stage, April corn probably being more dense stage, Purdue's guide would say we are unlikely to see a response to spraying fungicide on that corn. No second spray needed. But if you're in that mid-May, late May window, you're in this more blister stage, absolutely spraying it. By waiting to that point like we did, I think we have less chance of needing to spray the second time. I had a conversation with a guy yesterday. 2024, he had tar spot roll in bad. Corn went down. Said he estimates he left 20 bushel on the field. So, well, you're right here. You're on this line between doe dent. Purdue would say the chance of you having a yield increase by another fungicide spray is probably not going to happen. So you ask, what about standability? Will that help keep the corn up? Yeah. If we start having disease move in here, we're losing leaf area. We have to find energy somewhere. That plant's going to rob from the stalks and leaves to finish out that ear and the roots. Making a $30 fungicide application might help save your stalks. And he said, $30, let's say corn's, let's say $4 for easy number. $4 corn, 20 bushel on the field, $30 versus $80. So Brian, what would you do? Well, I understand. Down corn is not fun. More time, wearing the equipment. I don't think you'll see a yield bump, but you can definitely see a plant health, intactness, speed of harvest increase with that. I really think whether it be southern rust, or I had one coming yesterday too, tar spot. Similar chart, similar recommendations here. Tar spot's also starting to pop up. I had a field that got sprayed 3 weeks ago, and a gentleman walked in here, brought in 3 leaves and said, there's tar spot all over these. How long has that tar spot been going? Well, if you're seeing spots now, longer than what we think we have. Maybe the residual was not lasting as long as what we thought it would have been for the rainfall events. So, no. Did we waste our money on that? No, if anything, I think we probably helped our standability and helped the harvest with that as well. But I do expect over this next week, get more questions. And we find more and more tar spot and southern rust popping up. The question of, do I need to hit it again? It's hard to look in your budgeting software and find another $30 an acre to go out and hit this again. But if it can help keep corn upright, there may be some value to that. Other questions?
Did you coordinate with your dad? That's always the question.
We share a mind sometimes. Didn't have to. Just knew he was going to bring that up. No, Kim, I thought someone would. Period. Because that's between how much water, where's the crop at, diseases. From my experience, diseases are our yield limiting factor 4 years out of 5. This year, with all the moisture we've had, we should expect to continue to find diseases building and taking off. Nothing else? Guys, appreciate your time. Lunch is over here. Grab a burger, grab some chips. Sit around. I'll be here if you got more questions. Appreciate your time. Go get the combine ready.